Good morning, and welcome to Changing the World with God and with Good, where for about 5 or 10 minutes I get to share with you God and His simple truths for humanity, universal truths for all of humanity without religious bias, ethnic bias, national bias, political bias, or gender bias. And for a moment I want to talk with you from the topic or the subject, running from God. And I want to talk from this particular subject because I would like to bring about a little clarity as it relates to our running from God. Most of us, I believe, when we hear the term that someone is running from God, we assume that what is being inferred by that statement is that someone is running from his or her calling, that God has maybe called him or her to the ministry or to share or to spread the good news, and that this particular person is running from God by running from their calling. Or we believe that when we hear the phrase that a person is running from God, that the person is running from something that God has told or required of them to do. In the case of Jonah, when he was commanded or told by God to go down and speak to the people, and he refused, thereby landing him in the belly of the whale. So often we think about, when we hear the term that someone is running from God, when they're physically doing something. But today I want to remind you, or to help you to understand, that more people run away from God by running away from His simple universal truths than will all the people in the world ever physically run away from God. Hear me. You know, there are simple kingdom characteristics that God has implemented in our hearts, in the earth, since humans first began inhabiting this earth. And instead of embodying those kingdom characteristics, we run from them, running towards other things. And we don't readily recognize that when we're running from God's, and again, you must remember that God is the epitome of good. So when we're running from good, when we're running from being defined and described by our good in the earth, then in essence what we're doing is we're running from God. Now this is what a problem that Jesus encountered when He preached God's simple truth. You must understand that He never endorsed, nor did He preach religion. He didn't preach ethnic superiority. He didn't preach, state superiority. He just preached simple, universal truths that were meant to apply to all of humanity. And because He taught in the manner which He did, not endorsing, not vouching for a particular religion, oftentimes the simplicity of His message people ran from. This is why He encountered so many difficulties in His day, why He ran across so much opposition, because instead of endorsing and promoting, propagating religious doctrines, religious theologies, religious customs and traditions, He spoke simple truths that transcended religion, that transcended ethnicities, that transcended nationality, that transcended politics, that transcended gender. He spoke simple truths, and because His truths were not His own, they were God's truths. When people turned their backs and rejected His truth, how many of you know that what they were in essence doing was rejecting God? They were running from God. Because see, they wanted religion. They wanted the religious traditions. They wanted the religious doctrines. They wanted the religious theologies. They wanted the religious customs. But Jesus wanted them to know the truth, because He knew that the truth is what sets you free. He knew that God looks not at our religion. He looks not at our ethnicities. He looks not at our nationalities. He looks not at our politics. He looks at our hearts. He looks at the simple things in life. He looks at, the things that we think, the things that we say, the things that we do. And those, things, those are human actions. They're not Christian actions, Muslim actions, Jewish actions. They're human actions. And because they're human actions, they represent universal, simple human truths. I hope you're getting this now. I hope you're getting this, because it's the same problem that Jesus encountered. People would rather have their religious doctrines, their religious theologies, their religious customs, their religious traditions instead of the truth. And they ran. Many of them ran from him. They ran, as do we today, that we run from the simple in exchange for complicated theologies, in exchange for complicated doctrines, in exchange for things that we'll just conclude in our own minds and out of our own mouths that, there's just some things that God would not have us to know. There are just some mysteries. Well, there are some simple things that God would have us know, and he would have us be called back to those simple things, negating the fact that the simple things have been around long before religions have been around, long before humans began identifying themselves based upon different ethnicities, long before we began thinking that one nation was superior to another. There were some simple things that Jesus tried to teach people, and they ran. Not only did they ran, they began talking about him. Because what he was saying didn't align with what was being taught. It didn't align with the popular theologies. It didn't align with the popular doctrines, and they talked about him. They ran from him. They talked about him. Not only did they talk about him, they thought that he was possessed with a demon, because he wouldn't align himself with, tradition. He wouldn't align himself with customs. He wouldn't align himself with Jewish theology and Jewish doctrines. He spoke a simple universal truth that transcended religion. And they ran from it, running from God. You know how we'll do today when we encounter somebody that's not speaking what we commonly believe. What do? We call them the Antichrist. You've heard it. You may have even spoken it out of your own mouth, just because it didn't align with your religious learning. They were all of a sudden not of God, because they said, you know what, if I go northeast and you go northwest, if we change course, we'll both get to the north and we'll both get to our goal, which is God. But because I don't go your way and you don't go my way, then what you're saying, I'm just going to shut down. I'm not even going to listen to what you have to say. And all of a sudden you become the Antichrist. Not only did they run from him, not only did they talk about him, not only did they think that he was possessed with a demon, but if you really understand it, you will understand that they began to wait and to plot and to plan, hoping that they could catch him up in his own words. You know how we do today. It's no different than what we do today. Running from simple universal truths in exchange for complicated, nonsensical religious doctrines, religious theologies, religious customs, and religious traditions. And ultimately they killed him. Ultimately they killed him. Not knowing that in killing him, what they were in actuality doing, they were running from God, because all he was trying to do was teach them that that there was some simple universal kingdom characteristics of good that transcended all that they had learned in their religious teachings. This is why he was able to say, Father, forgive them, for they not know what they do, because they don't even recognize that they're running from you. They think that they're running to you by doing evil in your name, when in actuality, they're running from you because they're running from your message. They're running from the messenger that you sent into the earth to teach them what it means to be pleasing unto you. Are you running from God this morning and his universal truths? universal kingdom characteristics that were meant to apply to all of humanity? Are you running from God because you're running from the truth in exchange for your religious traditions, your religious doctrine, your religious theologies, and your religious customs? Are you running from God because you're running from the truth? I mean, do you automatically just shut down and just shut people down when they start talking about, beliefs or ideas about God that doesn't align with your religious beliefs? Do you just shut them down? When in actuality, they may be sent by God to open your eyes to see Him even more intimately, even more fully. But do you shut them down because what they're saying don't align with what you believe or what you've been taught? I mean, when you hear somebody tell you that God would rather us be a loving people, and that's more important to Him than Christianity, Islam, or Judaism. I mean, are you that person that believes that God knows us by our religion instead of by our fruits? I mean, are you running from the simple truths that have been in the earth since humans first began inhabiting the earth? I mean, when you hear somebody say that, beloved, God would rather you extend mercy and compassion than to identify by your human labels. Are you that person that thinks about, well, no, the sacrifice is more important because you're thinking about Jesus's death and crucifixion and resurrection, thinking that was what was really important for humanity because in that one act, He died for the sins of the earth? Are you believing that that is more important than what you do in the earth? And if you are, then you're running from God's simple truths, because even Jesus talked about having the type of faith that was evidenced by our actions. He said, if you love me, do something, keep my command. This is why He was also able to say that not everyone that says unto me, Lord, shall enter into heaven, but only they that do the will of the Father which is in heaven. This is why He was able to say that God knows the tree by its fruits. He taught faith that's evidenced by simple truths. No, not that you can say among yourself that we're the descendants of Abraham and that that's enough for God. No, not that you can say unto me, Lord, Lord, and that's enough for your salvation. He taught repentance, which is an act, as a methodology to repairing the breach in our relationship with God that's caused by our shortcomings, our mistakes, our bad decisions. Not that you could just believe that, or call yourself by a specific religious name and that would be enough. That's not what He taught. He taught that if we forgive men of their sins or wrongdoings, that God would forgive us of. This is universal. No matter whether you're Jew, Christian, Muslim, black, white, green, yellow. If you would forgive man of his sins, so shall your Father forgive you of yours. I mean, so many of us miss the simple, universal truths. We run from them, and we wind up running from God because God is truth. God is truth. And when we run from the simple truths that He would have govern all of our lives, we're in actuality running from God. So you must remember that God didn't just become God when we invented religion, nor did His expectations of humans originate with the invention of human religions. God has always been God. And even before there were, human ethnicities, human religions, before we began establishing nations and politics, there was God, there were humans, there was good, there was evil, and there was repentance. And every man that has lived in the earth has had the opportunity to know all of those things, to practice all of those things. We've all been humans. God is the one that's responsible for having created all of us. We've all been able to engage in good actions. We've all been able to engage in evil actions, and we've all been able to repent when we fell short. Yet we miss that God is the same in the beginning and the end. And we miss that just as it is in the beginning, so is it in the end. And in the beginning, before man could run to religion in an effort to run to God, he could always run to love. And let his running towards love be indicative of running towards God. Or he could choose to run away from God by running to hate. I mean, even before he could run to ethnic identifier as representing running towards God. He could run to mercy and allow that to represent his running to God. Or he could decide to run away from God by running in the direction of being merciless. Yes, he could run to God by running to compassion. This is universal. Or he could decide that he was going to run away from God by exuding and exhibiting animosity towards his fellow man. See, I'm just telling you that before man could, do any of the things that we think are important to God now, before they were religious, man could run to God by running to honesty. I mean, even before he could run to Judaism. Or he could decide that he was going to run away from God by running in the direction of dishonesty. I'm saying, beloved, that there are some universal simple truths that God initiated in the earth and in our hearts that were meant to govern all of us. Again, we've always had the ability to run towards God by running towards peace. And this was the case even before the Muslim term, Assalamu alaikum. Or he could decide to run away from God by running towards war and violence. I mean, they could run towards forgiveness, which represented running towards God even before Jesus of Nazareth taught that we should forgive our brothers 70 times 7. Man has always been able to run towards God by running towards forgiveness, or we could run away from God by running towards retribution and blame. I hope I'm helping somebody this morning, because I really want you to run towards God, and we run towards God by running towards and embodying his universal kingdom characteristics of good. This is how we run towards God. It's not about running towards a religion, and I'm not knocking religion. I'm just saying that God is bigger than religion, and his universal kingdom characteristics of good transcend religion. Again, Jesus taught that not everyone that calls him Lord, Lord shall enter into heaven, but only they that do the will of the Father which is in heaven. And that will is about being known by your fruits. So I leave you this morning with the question, are you running towards or away from God? Are you running towards the simple truth that you might be known by your fruits? That it's more important to you that you be identified and defined or described as loving, as merciful, as compassionate, as honest, as peaceful, as forgiving, as grateful, as humble? Or is it more important to you that you be defined by Christian, Muslim, Jew, black, white, Republican, Democrat, American, foreigner? What's more important? Because again, you must understand that God transcends all those labels. And at the end of the day, it's either that you're on the side of good, and you got to remember that God is the epitome of good. So if you're on the side of good, then you're on God's side. Or either you've committed and made a decision that you're going to be on the side of evil, and we all understand that Satan is the epitome of evil. So I just ask you this day to choose you. This day, are you running towards God or running away from God? And I just urge you to run towards the simple truths that I share with you, that Jesus of Nazareth have shared with us, that God might truly know you by your fruits, and that we might really begin to change the earth for God with good. I love you. I thank you. And until next time.